Hello, welcome back to the podcast. Today I'll be sharing my audio clips from Instagram Lives that were recorded back on the 18th and 25th of November 2020. So if you tuned in, then even listening again is probably going to benefit you because you don't actually take in all of the information that you hear right away. But I know that many of you don't watch IGTVs or you might have missed them because I did quite a few at the end of 2020. So in this combination of Instagram Lives as two together, I talk about hirsutism and hair growth, Epstein-Barr virus or EBV, mast cell activation syndrome and histamine issues, testing for mold illness, high estrogen levels and my recommendations for that, acne and what it means if it's symmetrical, if it's happening on the jawline and the chin, and my advice and experience with using retinoids topically. Talk about PCOS, Candida, ketogenic diets for women, and bioidentical hormones. Again, a wide range of subjects. These were all listener questions, so I'm sure there's something in there that you're going to benefit from. Let's get straight into the episode. Hope you enjoy it. So the first one is on Anna. You're on live. Hi, Anna. So it's my first question on the list was, what's my thoughts on amino acid supplements for hair growth? So your hair is made from amino acids and keratin, so it's important. But ideally, we should be getting enough protein from our diet. So eating animal protein is my preferred source, but you could be eating enough. So the goal is like 20 to 30 grams per meal. So around 80 to 100 grams total for the day for most people. If you're exercising, if you're healing, sometimes you need more than that. But you should be eating enough, but a lot of people aren't digesting and absorbing it properly, so that could be the issue as well. You're eating all of this protein. This happened to me. I was spending like hundreds of pounds on organic grass-fed animal products and beef and chicken and eggs, and I was still struggling with low levels of amino acids and proteins. My body wasn't able to heal itself because I had low stomach acid, I had H. pylori, I had SIBO, malabsorption. So it comes back to digestion a lot of the time. Only in people who are like severely compromised or have really backed up liver detoxification pathways or are vegan or vegetarian, or maybe recovering from some sort of surgery, would I recommend an amino acid supplement. I recommend protein powders a lot of the time, like a pea-based protein, or if you can tolerate dairy, whey protein, collagen protein would probably be a better fit in your situation, but not specifically amino acids unless it's one of those situations that I just mentioned. Someone's asking about hirsutism, so facial and body hair growth excessive in women, driven by high cortisol, which is driven by mold and pathogens, specifically Bartonella, which is a Lyme co-infection. Any tips, please? So you're not really going to notice any changes to topical things until the infections are addressed, which is frustrating. You could control it maybe with electrolysis or waxing plucking, but you know yourself, this person, that the root of the problem is the chronic infections, and that's what's happening to me as well. So I had a lot of PCOS symptoms. I really think my PCOS was driven by all of this stuff that's been going on, because it really is a symptom. So rather than just focusing your efforts on getting rid of the hair, you need to look deeper and address some of these infections. So with mold and Lyme and co-infections, you start with the mold first a lot of the time to take that pressure off the immune system, and then sometimes the Lyme symptoms just keep at bay on their own. So rather than chasing the Bartonella with antibiotics and really harsh treatments, addressing the mold first by either getting out of the environment or moving, remediating, which is very difficult, but it needs to be done if that's driving your health problems. And then once the mold's been addressed, and your body will start to detox naturally once you move, but you might need to do more specific things afterwards, like binders and liver support. Coffee enemas are really effective, but it may be that you then need to be more targeted for the Bartonella. So Cellcore Biosciences, the brand who I love and use regularly, they offer a liquid tincture specific to Bartonella. I think it's called IS-Bart, and you probably need to work with a practitioner to get access to that, but that might be something that you would then add in once the mold's been addressed. If you're still symptomatic, you would be more specific to the Bartonella. Why do I often have very symmetrical breakouts on both sides of my face. So this is very common. It depends on where it's happening on the face, because sometimes that can indicate different imbalances. So if it's always like on the forehead in similar places, it could be due to digestion and stress. If it's on the cheeks, it's more internal inflammation, liver detox problems, gut health, in my opinion and experience. Lower part of the face, if it's happening like sides of the chin every single month in this area, probably hormonal, probably gut health as well. And sometimes I was chatting about this with my friend Cheryl on a podcast that's going to be coming out in maybe January or February time. Someone asked, I don't know if it's the same person, asked a similar question. Sometimes it's due to the treatments that you're doing for the breakouts that it reoccurs in that same area over and over again. So if you're popping, squeezing, causing damage and trauma to that area, or you're using harsh products that are stripping the skin, then that area is going to be weakened and it's going to be more susceptible to breakouts. So then you have a vicious cycle. So it's either something internally that your body's trying to tell you, so that would depend on where it's happening, or it's the treatment that you're doing for the breakouts that's just making it more vulnerable to breaking out the next month. What do I think of using a treatment like Cellcore products on your own? It depends on the person and how symptomatic you are. If you're just like wanting to optimize things and maybe you just have a few digestive issues, you suspect parasites, then in some cases it can be worth doing like a intro and the parasite cleansing on your own. They do offer through the Microbe Formulas line the parasite stuff, so it is safe to use on your own without a practitioner. And they understand that some people don't have access to a practitioner, they can't afford it, and you have to prioritize one or the other. So it shouldn't be this thing that's completely just for the people who can afford it. I want it to be accessible to everyone. I've actually made my Cellcore practitioner number available on my bio, the link in my bio. But if it's something like mold or Lyme disease or more like heavy metals, complex chronic illness that you're dealing with and you're quite symptomatic, I would really advise you to work with a practitioner at that point, because you could potentially make things worse and get a flare up. So it depends on how severe things are and what you've tried before. How can you naturally treat EBV? Will celery juice and saunas help with EBV? So I think like 90% of the population have Epstein-Barr virus, and similar to the virus that's going around now, it's not the virus that's the problem. It's not the bug, it's not the organism, it's the host, the immune system that's the problem. So you need to work on supporting the immune system from all aspects. So yes, sauna, infrared sauna in particular can help. Celery juice potentially could help, but probably not on its own. It's just like an add-on that can be useful. And I don't know like the connection virally with celery juice. I'm sure that that's the reason that the medical medium really recommended it in the first place. I usually use celery for the electrolyte balance and the stomach acid support and the minerals, as opposed to like a direct antiviral thing. But my approach to Epstein-Barr virus is removing parasites, because parasites are the big organisms and they harbor or hold viruses. So if you're just trying to attack virus, but you have parasites still, you can't actually get to them, and that's why they come back a lot of the time. And parasites stimulate the Th2 arm of the immune system. So if you think back to science class, we have a kind of seesaw, and it should be balanced, showing optimal immune balance. It's not too overactive, it's not too underactive. Parasites stimulate the Th2, makes you very inflamed, makes you very allergenic and histamine-like, but in that same way, it suppresses Th1, and that's the part of the immune system that deals with bacteria and viruses. So you can't fully address SIBO, Epstein-Barr, herpes virus until parasites have been knocked out. So I would start there if you haven't already, and then there might be some more specific herbs and biocidin, lauric acid that you do for the Epstein-Barr, but the goal is to have a healthy immune system that keeps the virus at bay, and it's just when you get run down that it's kind of keeping you in check. What do I think of taking Mongolian sea buckthorn oil for skin issues? I don't know the specific Mongolian type. I know sea buckthorn oil. I don't usually recommend using that topically. There's other oils that are much more suitable to acne prone skin, and I'm not sure what you mean by skin issues, whether it's on your face or your body. Could be useful for body, but the skin in your face is a lot more sensitive to the types of oils you use, and if you have issues with acne, it could be to pore plugging. If you're talking about taking it internally, I don't typically use a lot of sea buckthorn oil, only in women postmenopausally who have vaginal dryness. It does have omega-9, I think, or omega-7, I can't remember, that's specific to improving vaginal dryness, so I would potentially use it in that situation, but not really for skin issues. Kristen, what do you recommend for mast cell activation syndrome? So first, figuring out the cause of that. So for me and a lot of people, it's mold illness, mold exposure that's the trigger. So removing yourself from the environment and dealing with that problem first will then just naturally calm down the immune system and that hyperactivity, that hyperhistamine overload. Reducing high histamine foods can be very beneficial, and it was for me, it was a game changer, just helping to manage my symptoms, but it wasn't addressing the root of the problem. So I spent years just on a low histamine diet, thinking that I'd got it under control, but as soon as I strayed from that, the symptoms just came back. So for me, getting out of the mold was a big one. And for some people, the histamine diet doesn't really change much, but it's really worth a try. I think I've got a question in here anyway, how to know if histamine is a problem for you or not. So if you have mast cell activation, then there's a good chance that it is histamine driven, and certain foods like fermented foods, alcohol, pickles, leftovers, they're usually the highest in histamine. So maybe reducing your intake of those, seeing if things improve. And with histamine reactions, it can be pretty quick. So it's not something that you have to wait 3 months to notice the difference with. If it's a problem for you, you should be able to notice within a couple of weeks whether it's a problem or not. If you add them back in and you get a flare up of symptoms, then that's a pretty good sign that it is an issue. But the food isn't the problem at the end of the day. It's your body, your detox pathways, your inflamed body because of parasites that's the issue. Quercetin can be good as a mast cell stabilizer. So check with your practitioner, but sometimes 500 milligrams of quercetin taken at least 20-30 minutes before food can actually calm the mast cells so that when you eat that meal, you're not as inflamed and overreactive. So I think that rules out my histamine questions. And I have 2 blog posts for this person asking about mast cell activation syndrome. At the time that I wrote this, I didn't know that I had mast cell activation syndrome. I didn't know that I had mold illness. But I've made notes of both of those things in the blog post somewhere. So you can go on my website, which is linked to my bio, and read those for more information on mast cell stabilizing nutrients, probiotics, food, diet, all of that. The next one is thoughts on Ayurveda and eating in alignment with your body type. So Ayurveda's kind of ancient Indian medicine. And yeah, Kristen Niels is caused by mold illness. Thank you for the info. Hello. So Ayurveda can be great for some people, but for me, I'm Pitta, so Pitta body type. So there's 3 doshas: Pitta, which is kind of fire; Vata, which is air; and what's the other one? Kapha, which is kind of earth. And we all have a blend of them, but for some people, most people actually, one of them is more dominant when you're out of balance. So my Pitta was too high. That was causing redness, inflammation, reflux, acidity type symptoms in the body, loose stools, and it tends to be like the high-strung, overachiever, perfectionist people who develop a Pitta imbalance. So in terms of Ayurveda, I would need to go on like a vegan diet. I would need to drink milk. I would need to eat raw vegetables. I had SIBO, so I couldn't eat raw vegetables. I had a dairy sensitivity, so I can't tolerate dairy, milk, and I thrive off animal protein, and going on a vegan diet would literally wreck my digestion. So I understand that where they're coming from. So they're talking about reducing inflammation, reducing acidity, alkalizing the body, calming the fire internally. But you can't just give like a blanket diet or blanket recommendations to a whole group of people, because everyone's like so individual, and it depends on where you're at with all of these other lifestyle factors as to whether you can even tolerate some of those suggestions. But some things I do still follow. So like with the exercise, I don't do very sweaty, intense exercise anymore because I've already got that internal fire. I don't need to stimulate that even more. So I do follow it to some degree, but not completely. But some people swear by it. A good, what's her name? A good practitioner or resource is Sahara Rose. She has a book called The Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda. So that's maybe a good one to look into, but it is very vegan diet, vegetarian diet based, I think even her recommendations, because that's just the way that Indian medicine and Ayurveda is. So I don't agree with it on that aspect. Sarah, how do you know if you have mold illness and how do you get tested for it? So the test that I did was the Great Plains Lab Mycotoxin urine test. And I got it free because I was at a seminar by Great Plains Lab in London in 2019, and they were giving complimentary tests. But I think if you were to order through me, it's around £230 or maybe a little bit less actually. So there is an option there, but there are other things as well online, like the VCS test, visual contrast sensitivity test, which is an eye test, which sounds weird to check for mold, but mold and alcohol are in the same family, like fungus family. And if you think when you have alcohol, your vision can go blurry, that's kind of what's happening with mold illness. When you've been exposed for a long time, the mold toxins start to damage the optic nerve. So you can end up, my vision's perfect though, so these are just computer glasses, and I'm quite young, so I passed the test. So if you pass, that doesn't rule out mold completely, but if you fail the test, then that's a pretty good sign that you have mold as an issue, because that's only one of few things that can cause you to fail. And that's a paid test, but it's literally like £10 or less. So just type that in Google, VCS, and it's the Surviving Mold website one that I use. That's a really good starting point. And symptoms, like certain symptoms can indicate mold, and I have a few podcasts on that as well. And then there's some quizzes. So if you, just remind me, send me a DM or something, I'll send you 2 quizzes that I use as well to rule it in or rule it out. But also like just being intuitive with your home. If a lot of people in the UK, obviously it's raining and cold and damp all the time, the buildings are very old, so that increases the likelihood. Whereas if someone's in the desert in Arizona and it's dry, then they're much less likely to have an issue. So if you have visibly seen mold in your home, then that increases the likelihood. But in my previous home, you couldn't see a thing, but we had a crawl space under the house that flooded, wasn't dealt with correctly, and that caused mold that you couldn't see, but you could smell a mustiness. When you'd been out for a week or so on holiday, you came back, you could smell the mustiness, but then within 30 minutes it had gone because you got used to it. So there's like a few signs like that. Abby, sorry, didn't mean to type those laughing faces. That's fine. Sarah, you're welcome. Yeah, so that is, if you live in an old house, my old house was like a Victorian terrace built in like the 1890s. So even if we'd never had a water event, you can think of how many people have lived there before and painted over any issues, like floorboarded over something that was a problem. So yeah, it could be an issue, and especially like anything that's chronic digestively, chronic inflammation, so like your reflux, that could, I wouldn't jump to that straight away because there's so many other things to try first, and that's what I did, just rule out everything else, because if it is mold, then it is a problem and that needs to be addressed, and that could be a root of a lot of different things. So I have a question on Facebook from Shirley: how to lower your AST and ALT liver enzymes naturally. I do take letrozole for cancer. Yeah, so you would need to just double check with your practitioner or doctor with my recommendations. I'll just give lifestyle ones anyway because that's the easiest. And it could be as a result of the medications. That could be, I'm not too sure with that one in particular, Shirley, but some medications can cause an increase of liver enzymes because you're just putting an extra demand on the liver with what you're taking. So if it's been a problem for a while, then it may be due to thyroid issues, insulin and glucose issues, and chronic inflammation, poor detox pathways, so things just aren't moving through the liver correctly. So it could come back to gut health, nutrient deficiencies. If you're overweight, if you drink alcohol, then addressing all of those things. Exercise can help to lower them as well. So have a look into those things. And with supplements, it's usually the lifestyle and diet that make the biggest difference. So yeah, not really any supplements I can just recommend without knowing more, unfortunately. Again, if anyone is on live on Instagram, I should have time to answer your questions, but I've got a few more here. Nicole asked, would love to learn more about high estrogen and overactivation of aromatase and the impact on testosterone. So I was teaching about this at the weekend at CNM. So when I was lecturing hormones, there was a whole section on aromatase. So basically aromatase is how androgens convert into estrogen. Estrogen ultimately comes from androgens, male hormones, in the first place. So some people have an issue with slow aromatase, so they're not converting testosterone or androgens into female hormones, estrogen, correctly. So they end up with a buildup of testosterone and androgens and a lack of estrogen. So things that can slow that down even further would be zinc. So that's why zinc, just for everyone in high doses, isn't the best. Because if you have low estrogen, it can lower that even more. But a lot of people have high aromatase activity, so they convert too quickly from testosterone into estrogen. That can lead to estrogen dominant type symptoms. So zinc in that situation would be good. Certain flavonoids, so quercetin, I think it's called, what's the other one? There's one in flaxseed, but I can't remember. Resveratrol can be good at slowing down that aromatase enzyme. But a lot of this happens in peripheral tissue. So if you have excess body fat, so if you're overweight, then that's going to make you more estrogen dominant because you have more aromatase happening. Plus, fat tissue makes estrogen on its own as well. Can one cure chronic Epstein-Barr virus? No, TPO. She's put antibiotics, Lauren, but I think it's antibodies, just chronic fatigue syndrome. So you can't get rid of Epstein-Barr virus completely. You can't get rid of viruses, you can't kill them. You just have to learn how to manage them in the system. So keep your immune system strong enough, and that should keep the virus at bay. So yeah, that's definitely possible to be symptom-free, but you can't get rid of the virus completely. What do I think of the product Advanced TRS spray? So I've never used this personally. My friend on here, Jonah, her handle is Girl Restore. She uses this product quite a lot, and I'm definitely going to look into it. So this is a binder that is pretty gentle and effective, but a lot of people use it for heavy metals and mold and things like that. She loves it, so I'm really wanting to try it out. I've heard good things. It's really good for aluminium or aluminum in particular, but I can't comment, unfortunately. Kirsty, are there any ways you could recommend to increase progesterone? So if you're under the age of 35, then your body should be able to produce progesterone on its own. If that's not happening, then there's something going on that's stressing your body, causing inflammation and preventing you from making it on your own. So so if you are above age 35, you're naturally going to decline in progesterone. So it could be that you then consider bioidenticals. Vitamin C can be useful in supporting progesterone levels. I think it's above 1,000 milligrams or 1 gram per day, so you'll probably have to supplement with that. I like whole food sources of vitamin C. You can get blends of them with acerola cherry, acai powder, and rosehip, those types of things. You could do, if you are, again, just approaching 35, perimenopause, try Vitex, or just as kind of a band-aid if you're younger than that, because it's not really addressing the root of the problem. But Vitex can increase luteinizing hormone. If you already have luteinizing hormone in elevations with something like PCOS, then that might actually make things worse. So just be mindful of that. But progesterone could be a good way to just support your body. But ultimately the goal is to take the stress and inflammation off the body so that it can do it on its own. So just all the basic typical things, do those first. Stabilizing blood sugar with protein, enough food, just overall, not exercising excessively, slowing down, resting more, sleeping more, stress management, making sure that your nutrient levels are good, particularly selenium, zinc, making sure that your gut health's good, like all of the basic stuff. But once you've ruled out those and conditions like PCOS and thyroid issues, then you could try some of those other tools. Things to avoid, so pretty much the opposite of everything I've just said. Stress is the main thing, but stress is physical, chemical, mental, emotional, not just worrying. Good and bad cholesterol increase while detoxing, anything to help. So that might not actually be a bad sign, Victoria. Cholesterol is actually a healing molecule. So it can sometimes be elevated when the body is overcoming something. So that's why I'm saying just monitor it. If you're working with a practitioner and they think the opposite, then you have to listen to those based on your health history. But cholesterol being elevated could be a sign that your body's more inflamed, which could be that you just need to support your detox pathways a little bit more with some binders, some liver support, some gallbladder support. And yeah, cholesterol being high could be thyroid related as well. So when you're going through a detox, your thyroid can be a little bit more stressed just because your things are changing, things are being killed, you're releasing toxins into the system a lot of the time. So your thyroid can be a little bit more stressed. That can then increase cholesterol levels. So it could be a temporary thing that you just need to kind of just be mindful of, or it could be a sign that you are just a little bit more inflamed and need some extra support, binder and liver wise. You're welcome, Kirsty. I think I've got a couple more questions. So Shirley said on Facebook, thank you, I'm working on losing 10 extra pounds. I do walk 3 miles a day, don't take any supplements or use alcohol. I do take milk thistle, beetroot powder. You're welcome. Yes, it sounds like you're doing a really good job. The cancer support is just going to be your main focus for now, and then monitor the liver enzymes and see if you then need to do anything more specific. So last question, I think, unless there's any on Instagram, then I'm going to finish up. Someone asked, what's the best thing you've ever done for your health? For me, so product-wise, I've always said coffee enemas have made the biggest difference for me personally. I was really reluctant to taking them or doing them initially, but I've done at least one every week for the past 2 years, I think, because they made the biggest difference. Just getting my liver working again, and your liver is like the filter and the metabolic system of the body. So it just helped me to function and just get through the past couple of years. Diet-wise, eating as organic as possible, as fresh and whole food based as possible has made a big difference. Lifestyle-wise, getting at the mold environment was the biggest thing for me. So I'd already done the basics for years and had got some improvement, but environment was a huge problem for me. So that has made the biggest difference as well. And yeah, improving my gut health, clearing infections from my gut, building back my stomach acid, because I had things like parasites, SIBO, yeast overgrowth for years, and that was constantly draining and zapping my energy, stealing my nutrients. Run down a low histamine diet for 1 day. So eggs with some sweet potatoes and ghee for breakfast, or a smoothie with some pea protein, almond butter, coconut milk, greens powder. Lunch, I just do, and lunch and dinner, just basically meat, veggies, and carbohydrates. So meat-wise, I personally stayed away from beef because it can be aged and hung for like 28 days. So that really increases the histamine. I'd make sure it's as fresh as possible. So I work from home, so it's a lot easier, but you could do something in the Instant Pot and it cooks it really quick. So you can do that in the morning before work and then take it in a Tupperware tub to your office. Obviously it's easier in 2020, everyone's working from home a lot of the time. So I'd do like lamb chops, carrots, veggies for lunch, and maybe some coconut yogurt and some berries, with some macadamia nuts. And then for dinner, I tolerated pork quite well. So pork chops with potatoes, cabbage, olive oil. So pretty easy How to know if fresh it is on the supermarket shelf with meat? You can't, so that's why it's always best to build up a relationship with your farmer if possible, and just let them know to freeze it as soon as they butcher the meat. That's what I did. Otherwise, just get the pack with the longest date on there. So go to like the back of the shelf and get the ones with the longest expiry date. So that's probably going to be the freshest option. Or just buy it and then freeze it as soon as it gets home, just to be extra careful. So let me get started with the ones on Candida. So someone's asking top recommendations for overcoming Candida overgrowth. So the thing with Candida is that it's a natural part of the gut flora, and it's very demonized these days. A lot of people do have issues with yeast overgrowth or Candida overgrowth. Those terms can be used interchangeably because of antibiotic usage, high sugar diets, stress, immune suppression from things like heavy metals and mold potentially. So it is a big problem, but rather than just attacking the yeast or the Candida, you actually want to support the immune system overall, and that keeps the Candida or the yeast naturally in check. And what I've been learning recently is that parasites actually harbor or hold the yeast. So in order to actually get to the Candida in the first place, you need to knock out the parasites first, and those will release metals and the yeast into the system so that you then have a better chance at addressing them with the tools and the herbs that you use. So 3 top things to help heal from Candida overgrowth: being mindful of your diet, so reducing excessive levels of sugar and refined carbohydrates in the diet. I don't think that it's necessary to completely cut out all carbohydrates. That was like a big trend a few years back, to go on this strict anti-Candida diet. And a lot of people might have got some symptom relief, but they actually then developed thyroid issues, adrenal issues, and another kind of intestinal overgrowth because they were so depleted. They weren't sleeping, their body was stressed because it didn't have the carbohydrates and the glucose to function optimally and actually heal the metabolism and the immune system afterwards. So I'm not like extremely strict on the carbohydrates. And in fact, actually feeding the bugs when you're trying to kill them can actually make the protocol a little bit more effective. They've shown this with SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth. They had a group of people do a really strict diet whilst on the antibiotics and as treatment versus someone else who took prebiotic, something like partially hydrolyzed guar gum. Usually they're the things that we're told to avoid if we have gut overgrowths, bacterial overgrowth, but they actually found that because the bacteria were feeding when you were trying to kill them, they were actually coming to the surface rather than you starving them out. They go into hibernation kind of, and they're more resistant to being killed. But if you're eating a ton of carbohydrates, like a carb-focused diet, then that's going to be an issue. So if you're vegan, then that's going to be difficult for you to overcome digestive issues, in my opinion, because your diet is very starch, grain, carb heavy. I prefer something like a paleo template diet when someone has digestive issues. I just found that to be the most tolerated a lot of the time. So clean up your diet, any refined sugars, processed oils, like all that usual stuff. Second thing would be to address parasites first so that you can then actually target the Candida more effectively. So that would be something like a parasite cleanse. They're not all created equally. I used the one from Cellcore just because I found that to be the most effective. And I've tried tons of other parasite cleanses and nothing's ever been as effective as that. When you can literally see things come out within a few days of doing that. And the third thing I do for Candida would be some specific antimicrobial nutrients, but only once the bowels are open, the liver gallbladder's working, and you're detoxing naturally. So things like coffee enemas can come into this as well. But if you're all backed up and then you go in and start killing things off, you are going to feel terrible. So please don't do that. Learn from my mistakes in the past. Things like caprylic acid, lauric acid, or monolaurine are really good ones because they're not too strong, but they can kind of penetrate the cell lining of yeast and Candida and mold and things, so that the other things that you do on top of that are actually more effective. There's a product called MegaMycoBalance by Microbiome Labs that can be really effective, and it's got some type of bee product in there. I think it's propolis. or something along those lines, which is very immune supportive. So you can do like Manuka honey as a food. Even though that is a sugar, it's got very good antibacterial, antimicrobial, anti-yeast effects, and it supports the immune system simultaneously. And potentially, if necessary in this situation, things like garlic or allicin extract from garlic, neem, berberine, clove, oregano or oregano can be good anti-candida, antifungal herbs if you're doing all of those other things combined, addressing the parasites, cleaning up the diet, getting the detox pathways open, avoiding unnecessary antibiotic usage if you're on the pill or hormonal contraception. If you've got high estrogen or high copper levels, then that also needs to be addressed, because those things can exacerbate yeast or candida overgrowth as well. Next question, I see one here from Laura. Can you talk a bit about acne along the jawline, underneath and on the neck? Is this likely to be purely hormonal? I find that it gets worse before my period and then improves a week after. Yeah, so anything that's cyclical, you always have to think hormonal, and especially in this area, that's like a typical pattern for hormonal acne. But you need to look at why the hormonal acne is there in the first place, and that can come back to issues with the immune system. Where does the immune system live? 80% in the gut. So even though it is probably hormonal and high androgen or high estrogen, low progesterone related in nature, you need to look deeper, not just Band-Aid. I did a post on this earlier, a reel, so definitely go and watch that if you haven't already. But usually at the root of hormone imbalances is poor gut health, sluggish detoxification, mineral imbalances, those things first. And yeah, look at those things. And anything on the neck, this area as well, the neck, the jaw, can be digestion too. So you might not have any digestive symptoms at all, so don't let that put you off investigating this area. And it could be that your hormone levels aren't high, it's just that you're not detoxifying them properly because of liver congestion. So yeah, just taking something like DIM or Vitex probably isn't going to help that much, and you're kind of just band-aiding the problem. And also looking at what you're putting on your skin, because if you're using a lot of pore clogging ingredients, then you're more likely to break out anyway, and just the smallest shift in hormones is going to send your skin crazy. So if you're using anything with coconut oil, that needs to go, making sure that you're exfoliating regularly. But yeah, probably hormone related, but look deeper as to why that is in the first place. Do I suggest bioidentical hormones to replace low hormone levels? I'm 45 and all hormones are low. If you're 45 and all of your hormones are low, then that's not normal. When you go into menopause, and if you were like 70 years old and you had low hormones, then that would make sense, and that would be like typical for someone that age. But if you're 45, and if you've not gone into menopause yet, I'm not sure, but this is a sign that something else deeper is going on. You probably don't have the building blocks or the resources to make estrogen, progesterone, testosterone properly. It could come back to nutrient deficiencies. Even if you're eating a great diet, you may not be fully absorbing them. So again, gut health is pretty much everything for everyone. Things like low stomach acid, parasites, gut infections could be affecting your uptake of food. And even if you took a bioidentical, if it's an oral capsule or tablet or something, you may not fully benefit from that. But if it's a cream, that's going to bypass the digestive system anyway. So it could be, it depends on the person. I can't prescribe bioidenticals anyway because I'm not a doctor. I do sometimes use with my clients bioidentical creams that I have access to, but only as a last resort and just for some symptom management. If someone's really struggling with hot flashes or vaginal dryness, something like that, then it could be useful. Or if they're trying to conceive and they have low progesterone and we're working on the root cause, but they've just fallen pregnant, then bioidentical progesterone can be a lifesaver. But I feel like this person needs to look at the thyroid, the adrenals, the gut health, and the nutrient levels first. Because if you just ignore that or don't investigate that and just go on the bioidenticals, something else is going to pop up down the line, because your body's trying to give you a message with this imbalance currently. And if you ignore that and just keep going on, then it's going to start screaming at you in other ways. So there's a time and a place for bioidenticals, but probably not for someone your age. But I don't know anything about your situation, so you'd need to speak to your doctor. You're welcome, Laura. Someone asked the best retinoids for acne. So retinoids is like a big family of vitamin A derivatives. So there's the extreme level of Roaccutane or Accutane, which is a synthetic mega high dose vitamin A used for acne, and its job is to kind of dry up the skin, help with turnover, skin cell turnover. And it can be very effective for clearing acne, but it comes with a whole host of side effects. It's got a black box warning because it's really harmful to the liver, really can make mental health a lot worse. So there's depression and suicide risks on Roaccutane. So the goal is to get vitamin A naturally in your diet. Hi, Kate. To get natural vitamin A in the diet so your body has that ability to shed skin cells optimally and keep sebum in check. So I would start there if you haven't already, like eating, I recommend this to everyone, even if you're not struggling with acne, is to be eating organ meats regularly. The one of the most inexpensive cuts of meat out there, probably the most nutrient-dense food on the planet. So if you're not already eating offal, livers, hearts, kidneys, please do. And there's different ways that you can prepare them so that they're a little less hard to digest. So start with the food first, but some people do need additional vitamin A just because their levels are so depleted, or maybe they have issues with the gallbladder and bile flow and they're not digesting and absorbing the fat-soluble vitamins from their diet. So addressing the acne from the inside and out is always the best option. So you can apply retinoids topically onto the skin. It's a whole family. There's different strengths and things as well. So it's hard to say for this particular person how her skin type is and whether she tolerates certain actives, whether she has more dry or oily skin, where her acne is, how severe. I would need to know all of those things first, ideally. But most people should start with the lowest strength possible and build their way up, because there is an adjustment period with retinoids as well, where it can cause a little bit of purging. Shouldn't be terrible. And the way that you build up tolerance is by starting 1 day a week, patch test always, and maybe doing it after a moisturizer just to have a bit of a buffer on the skin to get your skin used to it. But after a couple of weeks, 6 weeks max, the purging should be over. And if it's not, then that's a sign that it's maybe not the right product for you and you should try something else. I personally love retinoids, and I was hesitant to try them for a long while because I thought that I didn't need them because I'm only 20, am I 25 or 6? 26? Oh my God. So I was thinking it was something that I would need to add when I was like 30 plus, but I was working with my friend Cheryl, who is Honesty for Skin here on Instagram, and on Facebook you can find her Cheryl Woodman. But she introduced me to retinoids and they were a game changer for me, just making my pores less congested. I think I just must have like a vitamin A deficiency. I'm just always prone to vitamin A and D deficiency for some reason. And I've done genetic testing and that seems to be true as well. So usually this is like general sweeping statement, the best option to consider starting with in this situation, but check with your practitioners or whatever, would be a gram-active retinoid. And then the highest strength that you could probably work towards would be something like most people get in America, over-the-counter Differin or Adapalene. But I wouldn't start there. I would start with something like a gram-active retinoid. I know that The Ordinary do a couple of different ones, but start with the lowest. I can't remember what it is. It's like 0.0 something. And strength, and it's in squalene, I think. And that's an oil, so some people don't do well with oil. So just test that out, patch test as always, and see how that's tolerated and build up tolerance. Always wear sunscreen when using retinoids as well, because they can make your skin sensitive to the sun. But yeah, hope that helps this person. Can you do anything to make PCOS go? The doctor only just recently diagnosed it from a scan showing a lot of follicles on my ovary and acne along my jawline and neck. Would love to have it go if you can. So you can't get rid of PCOS, the genes. You have the genes for PCOS and obviously they've expressed now, but you can get rid of the symptoms and keep your symptoms at remission. That's totally possible. I've done it and helped hundreds of other women do the same. But if you were just diagnosed from a scan and obviously your acne So I'm not a huge fan of the ultrasound, the scans for PCOS, because that appearance of polycystic ovaries, or string of pearls, they sometimes call it, that can happen just naturally to any woman at certain points of the cycle. So if you took a random woman off the street and she'd skipped ovulation that month for whatever reason, stress, or if she was approaching ovulation, that would be a natural thing to happen. Those mini follicles kind of covering the ovaries, that would be what happens because you haven't yet ovulated. That's why I don't think it's too useful if someone's had a scan or not. I don't ask them to go to the doctors to get one. But the fact that you had acne as well, then that makes sense why they would diagnose you, because you had 2 of the 3 potential signs of PCOS. But I have a ton of information on, I think this person is Kirsty, a ton of information. If you scroll back on this Instagram page, my podcast, I've got multiple episodes, all free information for you to go back to. But the main drivers of PCOS are insulin resistance, so your body not using glucose properly, it kind of building up in the bloodstream. Your body pumps out a ton of insulin. That causes the ovaries to secrete a ton of androgens, male hormones. That interferes with ovulation, and then the PCOS symptoms come as a result of high androgen, high male hormone type symptoms. So insulin resistance, so regulating your blood sugar, eating protein, carbohydrates, and fats at every meal, doing moderate exercise, strength training, building your muscle, going for a walk after every meal, even if it's for 5-10 minutes. You can optimize your sleep. That helps with insulin resistance as well. A lack of sleep can make you more insulin resistant the next day. The other drivers seem to be inflammation and stress. So managing your stress levels, fixing your gut health, checking your thyroid health, because a lot of people with PCOS actually have thyroid issues alongside or as a driver of PCOS. But yeah, Kirsty, if you want to DM me, send me a message. I've got a really good PCOS course as well that you could consider, that just kind of streamlines everything that you need to know about PCOS pretty much. Hi, Anna. What do you think of taking aspirin to help fall pregnant? My friend had been told to do it by the midwife off record. Yeah, so I've heard that multiple times before. Basically, it can help with the blood flow. But to me, I'm always thinking you don't have an aspirin deficiency. That's not the cause of the problem. They sometimes recommend it during IVF procedures as well, even like directly to the doctor to patient. So I would run it by your practitioner first, your doctor first, or fertility consultant, just to double check. It's probably not going to do any harm. There's potentially some health benefits to aspirin, but I've not fully looked into it in too much detail. But I don't know if it's going to make the biggest difference. Like some of the stuff, this person is a client, so some of the stuff that we've been doing on gut health and cleaning up your diet and getting your thyroid and adrenals functioning, that's going to be way more effective than just taking aspirin. And I'm guessing your friend hasn't been doing all of those things either. You're welcome, Kirsty. Someone's asking about keto. I've heard it's not the ketogenic diet. I've heard it's not great because it lowers the gut bacteria. What about people with reactive hypoglycemia? So this is from Nicole. I'm not a fan of the keto diet, and I've not found it to be necessary when balancing blood sugar levels. It is recommended a lot for PCOS, but I wouldn't recommend doing that because it can actually then disrupt your thyroid and your adrenals, and as you said, wreck your gut health. So you can still manage hypoglycemia with carbohydrates in the diet. Everyone's a little bit different as to which carbohydrates work best. So I've worn a continuous blood glucose monitor in the past, which is a device that sticks in the back of your arm, and you can literally scan your phone against your arm and see what your blood sugar readings are in that moment in time. So it's a really good tool. The brand that I've used in the past from the UK is called Freestyle Libre. And in the US, there's a really good company called Levels that you can consider. I'm interviewing one of the founders on my podcast in the new year. I've already interviewed her, but it'll be released in the new year. So that could really help you identify the amount of carbohydrates you can, quote, get away with, in what combination and what types of carbohydrates. Because I found eating 100 grams of sweet potato versus fruit, the fruit works so much better for my body. So even if it's the same amount of calories, the same amount of carbohydrates, just the way that it breaks down in my body was really different, depending on the source of carbohydrates. Could depend on the other things you're having with that meal, how you combine it, what time of day, what time of your cycle you're in. So there's so many different variables. So using one of these glucometers could be a good thing to try. And improving your inflammation levels, because inflammation drives insulin resistance and blood sugar issues in the first place. So sometimes it's not even about the diet, it's these other things like having heavy metals in the body, or a big mineral imbalance. Low levels of potassium really affects your insulin sensitivity and blood sugar. Checking your thyroid, because if you've got a thyroid issue, you could be eating the best diet in the world but still struggling with blood sugar swings and weight gain. Making sure also that you're eating enough protein, Nicole. Most people don't. They think they're eating protein because they're having like an egg for breakfast, but that's not enough. It's a good source of protein, but it's not enough quantity-wise. So maybe tracking your protein intake for a few months or a few weeks even, making sure that you're getting at least 80 grams a day, maybe closer to 100, and just play about with, again, the different types of protein as well. Someone asked, so Chloe asked about mold toxicity. Do I treat clients with this, and do I have any tips for treating? So I seem to attract a lot of people who have similar issues to me. So acne, hair loss, mold recently. So I'm not an expert in mold, I always say that, but I've had to become like very knowledgeable about it just for my own personal health reasons. So I feel like I've become like a building biologist and a mold practitioner just based on everything that I've learned. And it's only been like a year since I found out that I had mold. I think it was end of 2019. But I do attract, I think just from the information that I put out there in my podcasts and Instagram posts, you probably noticed that it's become a little bit more focused on like mold and chronic infections and things like that at the root of hormone imbalances. So I have several clients with mold illness, and in terms of treatment, the first goal is to get out of the environment, because if you're still breathing in toxic mold and it's not been remediated or you've not moved, then that's step number one, avoid. Probably the first 3 steps, avoid, 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 if possible. Otherwise, you're just going to be band-aiding and fanning the flames of the fire rather than putting the fire out. So you want to try and avoid doing that if possible, but I understand that it's not as simple as just upping and leaving and selling everything. Like most people can't do that, and I've survived in that home for long enough, so an extra 6 months in there wasn't going to make a huge difference. But you could, in the meantime, do air filters, spending time outdoors, not going in the rooms that are particularly problematic. And then a lot of the time your body starts to detox naturally, so sometimes you don't really need to go in and push it too hard. I made that mistake when I moved back in June. I moved, so my body was already detoxing, and then I threw a ton of products and things at it because I like to push things a little bit too much and be the guinea pig with my own health. So things that you could try, I really love the Cellcore products. We've just seen a question come through as well. Do you recommend starting someone's journey with Cellcore or doing some testing first? It depends on the situation, someone's budget, someone's health history, how sick they are to that question. But the whole Cellcore protocol is basically addressing the root of health issues. So it doesn't really matter what the health symptom or condition is, the label, because the goal is to get the mitochondria functioning, to get the gut functioning, the immune system, clear out heavy metals that pretty much everyone has, clear out parasites that pretty much everyone has. And then if at that point, at the very end, and the whole protocol takes about a year, I don't do it to the T, so I don't take people through like every single stage, every single product necessarily. But then at that point, if you're still sick, then it's maybe worth tweaking things a little bit more. But if you have the finances to do some testing, that's always going to help speed up the process and just tailor things a little bit more. So with mold, Cellcore offer products like the biotoxin binder, but it's also important to address parasites first, get the bowels moving, get the liver, gallbladder You could do binders. I'm not a fan of the charcoal or the cholesterol harsh binders that are typically recommended when you Google, just because it's hard to dose them properly. You have to time them away from foods and supplements, and it just becomes like a full-time job. So the biotoxin binder, I think it's called bioactive carbon minerals, on the Microbe Formulas, the sister website. So you can get it through retail, and that's really effective. You can take it with or without food, any time of day. If you're doing the enemas, time it before and after the enema, just to catch any toxins that are released during the process. And check out my podcast with Dr. Jill Crista, I think it's number 72, and her book Break the Mold. That's really great. I love her naturopathic approach to mold illness. So for this person who asked. Anna asked about PHOX water, PHOX water filter. I had a quick look at this because I'd never heard of it before. It seems to be like a UK brand, and the marketing thing's very good because they're very eco-focused, like saving the planet, which is great, environmental. But in terms of the quality of the water filter, I'm not convinced that it's great. I think they're more focused on saving plastic and not being wasteful in terms of that than actually getting the best water quality possible. And they claim that they add like minerals and electrolytes back into the water. It's basically a sachet of magnesium and sodium, I think. There's more minerals like potassium, phosphorus, zinc that need to be replenished. So they're basically stripping the water, and a lot of it is probably just improving the taste, and then they're adding a few things back in to make it look good. I think it's just very hyped and a lot of marketing, and I still stand by something like the Berkey, because even though it's more expensive up front, like £300-400 max, with this water filter, even though it looks cheap to begin with, you have to change the filter probably every month, and then how much are you going to be spending in the long run? And then last question is from Beth. She asked, butt itchiness, so anal itching after passing parasites, could this be the eggs, and if so, any tips? So I'm guessing this person is doing a parasite cleanse. I think I've inspired a lot of people to parasite cleanse recently, and a ton of my clients are doing it at the moment, and it's causing the supplements to be constantly out of stock when I want them. So I'll have to stock up next time I recommend it. But it can definitely be the eggs from parasites. This is really common in kids with pinworms. They like scratching their butt, and then they get it under the fingernails, they lick their fingernails or whatever, and then they just pass it to everyone in the family, and it's really difficult to get rid of. So maybe not pinworms, but the eggs of the parasites can cause anal itching. Just the detox process in itself can cause a flare-up of symptoms. So for me, when I was doing my mold and parasite cleanse, I had this kind of fungal, like a red little rash between my butt cheeks. It's like a little heat rash thing, and that flared up, and I've not had that in years, but that was really itchy, and I'm like, what am I doing? Am I doing something wrong? But it was actually just my body healing, bringing things to the surface that have been suppressed for a while. So I wouldn't be too concerned. There's probably not much that you want to do apart from keeping the area clean, not wearing like thongs or G-strings or any tight underwear, washing your hands regularly, and just continuing the parasite cleanse pretty much. Okay, so that's all the questions I want to answer today. Hope you enjoyed this.